Welcome back to the Quantum Couch. I'm your host, Dr. Ina Conboy. Today, I am really excited to speak with Dr. Liz Alfson, a board-certified psychiatrist and experiential therapist based in Austin, Texas. Our discussion will center around somatic countertransference, the hard problem of consciousness, and what it means for us as healers, quantum mechanics, and Dr. Alfson's theory of therapy, which she considers to be a theory of everything. Dr. Alfson sees patients in her private practice and teaches psychiatry residents at various local university programs. Like me, she has great interest in the meeting place of mind and brain, body and consciousness, logic and intuition, science and spirit. She enjoys exploring these questions across disciplines: poetry, quantum mechanics, philosophy, neuroscience, and spirituality. Dr. Alfson, so happy to have you on this podcast.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
We have many listeners who are not in the psychiatry world. Could you please explain to us what transference is and then what is somatic countertransference?
Sure. So the simplest way to think about countertransference is it's how the therapist reacts to the patient. Emotions, thoughts, and then somatic is the body. So it's the body reactions of the therapist to the patient.
hmm And then I guess the question is, since we have countertransference, there's such a thing as transference as well?
Right. Yeah. So transference is the way that the therapist or the patient feels about the therapist. It's typically thought to be based on their past experiences.
And why is all of this important? Why are we even talking about this?
Yeah. That's such a broad question and a good question because I think it's important for all of these exciting reasons. The way that I ended up here with you is that my encounter with my somatic countertransference transformed the way I see what happens in therapy and transformed the way that I think about what happens between people and how the world works, which is how I found my way to you. Um, but but the reason that we care about countertransference and transference in therapy generally is that we think it's an important information channel, and we think it's an important thing to be aware of and to work with as part of helping people.
And how does that manifest itself? Can you kind of give us an example of where transference may be important for us to notice or countertransference may be important for us to
Sure,
take note of?
sure. So, say, for example, that you're sitting with a patient who had a lot of experiences of being judged as a child. And so then, as you're talking to them and looking at things with them, they're tending to see you as somebody who's going to judge them. And they're
Hmm.
having emotional reactions towards you as if you were judging them, whether you are or not. But those emotional reactions would be their transference from their
hmm
past experiences onto you.
And then what would be an example of countertransference?
So, say you're sitting with a patient who tends to have a lot of defense mechanisms of devaluing other people as a way of managing their own internal states. And so their way that they talk to you is to talk down to you, perhaps to talk to you in a critical way about what you're doing. And perhaps you yourself have had a lot of experiences of being spoken to in that way.
hmm
And so you would then have your own reactions towards the patient based on your own experiences, your own feelings towards the patient. And so we'd want to be aware of those because, we're not, we want to have our reactions to the patient be about what the patient's conflicts are, not necessarily our own reactions. But then again, it's a good information channel in that if you feel irritated by being devalued, if you don't react to that irritation in a negative way, it lets you know that something is happening that's important to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the key things in the psychotherapy that I do, and I think that you do. And
Yeah.
I practice psychodynamic psychotherapy, is where, first of all, I always tell my patients, whatever happens in therapy between you and I, please bring it into therapy and talk to me about it. Either if you feel really positively or really negatively or anything in between, because how you feel about me may represent how you feel about others outside of therapy. And that will give us a safe place to process all of this so then you can be more mindful of how comes up in other areas of your life. And then for myself, also have a um, supervisor who I meet with once a month who I can process my own countertransference with and kind of check in. Is this me? Is this them? What is going on in therapy? Like, have someone
Right.
have their eyes on this and be like, Ina, I think this is your shit you need to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
tell us a little bit more about countertransference, the somatic countertransference, because in all honesty, I do come across a lot of transference, countertransference, but
Right.
honestly, I don't think that somatic countertransference is something I learned much about. And even though I'm sure I encounter it myself, it's not something I really learned to take note of as much. So how did that even come up for you? And
Yeah.
how did it all come to be?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't learn about it either, and when it started happening to me, I thought I might have a brain tumor or something. I had no idea what was going on. I mean, really. So, so it's actually relatively common in the literature. It's called body-centered countertransference, just as often as it's called somatic countertransference. Yeah, it's more common than you would think. So for me, what happened is I decided to switch from seeing a psychodynamic therapist to seeing a therapist who was more focused on the body. And so all of a sudden, I started becoming more aware of my own body reactions to my emotions and anxiety. And then I was sitting in a med management visit with a patient who I really liked. And all of a sudden, I felt really nauseous. And I remember thinking, oh, crap. Like, I don't want to be sick. Ugh. And then I got a headache right here. And so the visit's going on and going on. And the patient goes, you know, I just feel so nauseous.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, anything else that you notice? And she said, yeah, I have a headache. Where? Right here, right where I have my headache. And then we went on through the visit and she left and my nausea and my headache went away. And I went to my new therapist the next week and I was like, this is what happened. Is there something wrong with me? Do I need an MRI? And I was so grateful to her because she knew all about it, actually experienced a lot of it herself and said, no, Liz, this is somatic countertransference. And that was really the
Hmm.
beginning for me. Um,
So, question about that, if I may. I mean, we're calling it somatic countertransference, but it doesn't quite jive with the wording per
yeah,
se. I
I
mean,
love
it
that
sounds like
question.
you're mirroring more what
Yeah,
the patient is
yeah,
experiencing because countertransference would be more like the patient is tired and then you're yawning because maybe you're developing boredom yourself and so maybe you're yawning, but like you're not developing feelings or something in response to a patient. You're literally mirroring.
yeah.
So,
So
what would you make of those words, I guess?
I love this question. I actually mostly call this somatic resonance and not
Hmm.
somatic countertransference for that reason, because it does really have more of a feeling of resonating with the other
Yeah.
person. Although there are certainly times when what I'm experiencing is my own feelings. Um, like I'm feeling the heat of anger right here because of some way that the person is relating to me, and I know that it's mine. But yeah, it is more like a resonance. Um, and that's what it came to be for me. So, I mean, I'm such a curious person. So when this started to happen, I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to explore this. I'm going to see what this is. And at the same time, doing all my own work, I'm like learning so much more about myself. And then the experiences start to expand and start to intensify. So where it's not just nausea and headache, but things that are very precise, being able to track things as they go up, feeling shapes, on Zoom, feeling things in body parts I can't see. I started to think about like what kind of information am I getting? What are these different categories of information that are coming to me? And I went into sort of like my inner mystic and my inner scientist. Like I want to investigate this, but I want to know what it means too. And what I found is that there are categories of information that you get. One is the mirror. So I'm sitting with someone, they're angry, they feel heat in their chest, I feel heat in my chest. Another one would be they're actually anxious or maybe defended. So they're not aware of anything in their body, but I can feel a little bit underneath. It's almost like it's preconscious, it's about to come up. And if I work with the anxiety or if I work with the defense, then I feel it come up. Um, so those would be two. Another one is just absolutely no information at all. Like I'm sitting with somebody and it's just my body is quiet as a mouse. And that to me has become another clue. One is that mostly it's about ego. Like somebody's ego is in the way here. Either I'm in my head thinking really hard about, like, what am I supposed to say now? What am I trying to make happen here? And I've kind of disrupted the connection. Or maybe they're really closed off, and so they're not accessible to me. Um, and sometimes it just means they're really fragmented, but mostly that no information is really useful. Um, and then the other one that I already mentioned is it's my own. It's my own countertransference. Um,
This is fascinating. I mean, for all of us who've done a lot of work with patients in therapy long enough, I think we know if we're able to form strong enough bonds, sometimes things we end up knowing is seems or appears to be almost either miraculous or
yes,
psychic
yes,
or almost just such a random download of knowledge that
yes,
we don't really know how we get it. But I think it's a very well-known phenomena among therapists of where if we allow our intuition to sink in and we're comfortable enough, these
yes,
things come up.
yes.
Um, and so I guess the question is, how can we explain that? There's a lot of
Yeah,
literature talking about that this
yeah,
happened,
yeah.
but it almost seems crazy to people outside of this particular world where how do you know what the other person is feeling? How do you
Right,
know what their body is
right.
experiencing, even though you're on Zoom miles and miles and miles away?
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
you have an idea, theory, hunch?
yeah. I That's a big question. I mean, I think,
That's all we ask on this show is just
well,
big
I
questions.
love big questions, but I mean, I love your question because it's the same. It's the next place my mind went. The first place my mind went was like, okay, what's happening to me, and what do I do with it? And the next thing I wondered was like, what is going on? How do I explain this? Because I'd done enough in my. You can't see on my video on my screen, but my video camera's over there. In the type of therapy that I do, it's considered standard to video record and review tape of any patient who will consent for that. So I've reviewed many, many hours of my own work. And so I was able to use that to data collect and track and really come to trust what was happening with me based on how my patients responded to me and what they reported to me. So, yeah, so that is where I went. So I think, and then the other thing that in what you said is that, I mean, Freud, Ferenczi, all sorts of people talked about these kinds of experiences. Freud talked about the idea of thought transfer and like telepathy type experiences. Like this has been part of the psychoanalytic literature for a very long time. And like you said, I think we've all experienced things like that, like having an image come into your head that's then the image that the patient goes on to describe. That kind of thing, I think, happens with frequency. Not that we talk about it, but it happens. So that's where I went next. And I looked with what I was comfortable with, so science. So I looked at science. And there's certainly a lot that's not quantum. Like there's a lot that's if you've ever read any of Ed Tronick's stuff, so Ed Tronick is a mother infant researcher. He trained under Barry Brazelton, and they looked at the mother infant dyad. And Ed Tronick talks about relational pathophysiology. So like heart rhythms and things like that getting synced up between mother and baby, or just physiological rhythms getting synced up. And related to that is the idea of interpersonal neural synchronization. So if you stuck an EEG on both of us right now in this shared task that we're doing, you would see that our brain waves start to get synced up when we work on
Hmm.
a shared task. And that's explained generally through classical means, like reading nonverbals very rapidly, tone, posture, visual, things like this, more classical things. So I definitely still think that that's part of the picture here, that that's like one way that this comes in. But I was having so many experiences that you're kind of hinting at this that don't fit a classical model at all.
For example?
Well, now I'm probably going to talk about synchronicities because to me, these things have an overlap. Um, so synchronicity is Carl Jung's term, and it's a meaningful coincidence. So the most common one would be you think of someone and then they call on the phone. Um, so for me, when I'm having very high body responses, I often get these synchronistic type experiences. And not only high body experiences, to me, it's high connection. The high body experience is a high connection state. Um, when I moved from Massachusetts to here, a couple of patients I gave my email to, so just saying like, you might want to let me know about something later, and that would be fine. And I had been here for 3 or 4 months, and this one particular patient just kept coming to my mind. So his name's not Steve, but I'm just gonna pretend it's Steve, and I would wake up, "Steve, Steve, Steve," like, "You need to contact him, contact Steve." And then I thought, "This is nuts. Like, you're not allowed to do that. That breaks the rules. I'm not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be him contacting me. That's how this is supposed to go." But I couldn't get it out of my head. So, he maintains a personal website that has a contact form. I couldn't find his email anywhere. And so I went and I messaged him through his website, and I said, "Hey, Steve, I hope you're doing well. I've just been having this overwhelming feeling that I was supposed to contact you. So I'm doing that. I hope you're doing well. We're happy with our move." So he wrote me back, and about the time that I start getting that like urge to call, he had almost died of a spinal infection, and he wrote to me from a rehab hospital.
Wow.
And
How did he react to you contacting him?
it made sense to him. He's like, "Yeah, of course."
Of course he wanted to contact me. I was dying.
No, he was delighted, and I mean, this is a patient I had a very good connection with. I gave him something, and he gave me something when I moved, and I keep it in my office. And actually, a couple months ago, I just got that same feeling of like, Steve, 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 need to contact Steve, and just messaged him, and I said, "I'm supposed to email you now," and he said, "I've been thinking about emailing you too. Hi." And it's just a brief sort of, "Hey." So that is not interpersonal neural synchronization.
Mhm.
That is not relational pathophysiology.
But it happens to so many of us.
That
Most of
Yes,
us experience something like that.
yes, yes. Yeah, I read a study that 44% of therapists experience synchronicities, and that struck me as low.
Yeah, I'm wondering how many just don't notice.
That's right, right, or don't understand that that's what happened.
I
So
recently went to yoga and
uh
I haven't been to yoga in months. And this teacher tells me, I was literally thinking of you and I looked up to see who signed up for my next class and your name was on it.
Aw.
I mean, that's a very small example of synchronicity, but it is an example.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and, I mean, we're in agreement on this. I think this is a very real thing, and to me, when they happen, they're meaningful. They're not accidents. It's hard for me to imagine how something like that could be an accident.
Well,
Um,
have you seen the movie I Heard Huckabees by any chance?
no.
It's a really great movie with a lot of famous actors, but the
Yeah,
whole, movie it's a comedy, philosophical comedy, but
yeah.
it starts off with this guy trying to figure out the mystery behind synchronicities that are happening in his life.
Oh my gosh, I feel like that's me.
But it's a great movie, highly recommend. I think you would enjoy
Thanks,
it. And
thanks.
everyone else who likes philosophy and comedy and very famous, awesome
That's
people.
Yeah, that's right.
Dustin Hoffman is in it.
Fun. Yeah, well, that's totally what I did. So I explored my own experience, and then I went looking for answers. And when I felt like the biology out there wasn't giving me the, like, it just didn't fit, it was more than that, I started looking other places. And so then I, expanded into quantum physics, which I had taken 2 years of physics in high school. I loved physics, and I thought, "Maybe there's something here," because that's the place where I found things that, give you that feeling of, "Ooh, something bigger is going on here." And, I encountered quantum entanglement, which I had read about a long time ago. And I thought, okay, now this might have something to do with it. So I'll go ahead and explain what that is.
Please, because
So the
most of us are clueless.
Right. So quantum entanglement is usually thought to apply to small particles. So say two electrons that leave from the same spot. Okay. And then there are detectors, far away detectors for each one of them. So they leave from the same spot and they travel. And what quantum entanglement is that when these electrons leave from the same spot, when you measure one in one detector, the spin up or down, it affects the spin of the other. So if you're listening and you think, what? That doesn't make any sense, you've basically understood it because it doesn't fit with how we see the world. We typically think that things are caused in the world because a force is applied to them, that the light turns off because I go over and I flip the switch. And quantum entanglement is really about the fact that these two particles were entangled, they were connected from the beginning. And that you set up conditions. And basically by setting up a condition where they were connected from the beginning and you intend to measure something, you cause something to occur. And to me, that felt a lot like what was probably happening here, that there was something going on that wasn't a light switch, that there was no magical force. There was no vector that traveled from here to Boston or from Boston to here that caused me to be in contact with that patient, that there was something else that had to do with connection. So, um, so I read about this, but then the scientist in me really wanted to be a good scientist. Like I didn't want to go around just throwing around scientific concepts willy-nilly because I knew that quantum physics was about little particles, not about people. Um, and for what it's worth, I'm not the first person in our field to think this way. Young was friends with Pauly, a physicist, and they had a great friendship. So, um, so and there is this idea in quantum physics that warm, wet systems are not supposed to stay quantum, that there's a certain time scale that's very small under which quantum conditions can occur. And this is going to get too complicated, but I think the main thing for the listeners is that um, warm, wet systems are not supposed to have quantum effects.
Are we wet worm
Yes,
systems?
we're wet worm systems. Biological systems are too warm and wet and messy for quantum conditions to occur. But as I went looking, I was like, I'm going to look for papers that show evidence of quantum entanglement in biological systems
Hmm.
because that would support me applying this idea, in the way that I'm thinking about it here. And so then I found this fish paper, which I think I sent to you, and every friend of mine has heard about it. But and it was so exciting. It was so exciting. It was like the most exciting thing that happened to me that year. Um, so in this paper, what they do is, so imagine a fish tank with a barrier in the middle. Okay, so that it's split into two sides. The water is shared, but fish can be put on each side and they can't swim together. So they take two groups of fish from different parts of the world and they set up two different experimental conditions. There are also controls for these, but I'm not going to talk about the controls. Um, so in this, what they're trying to do is investigate something called the bystander effect. And the bystander effect is if you take a group of cells and you irradiate it, and then you put it in with other like cells, the other cells will start to show evidence of protective effects to radiation.
Can you kind of explain it in more simple terms?
Sure. If you blast cells with radiation, it damages the cells. So so what they've found is that if you damage cells in a separate container and then you take them and you put them with other cells like them, that the other cells somehow seem to know, uh-oh, there's trouble around, and they start to build up protective factors to protect them
Even though
from.
these cells have not been irradiated with
Exactly. With the
just like
non-irradiated
okay.
cells, right.
Mhm.
And that's called the bystander effect. And that's typically thought to be something that occurs from local processes like cell transduction or something like that, signaling between the cells, more of the light switch effects. But this paper was to look at, could this be a quantum effect? Could the bystander effect be a quantum process, not just a local process? So what they did is they set up these conditions with these fish. So I printed out, this is one of the figures from the paper. But, and I know that not everybody's going to be watching, but they had two conditions. So they had one condition where they get A and B, they irradiate group A, they put them in the tank, one on each side, they swim together for 2 hours. They take them out of the tank, they take them to separate rooms, and then they kill the fish after 2 hours and measure for the radiation protection. Okay. In the second condition, they just let the fish swim together. Then they separate them. Then they irradiate group A. Then they wait 2 hours. Then they kill the fish. Then they measure for protective effects.
So the group A and B in both of those different scenarios are in different rooms. They're not even sharing
No,
tanks after they swim
they're
together.
together swimming in the tank for 2 hours. They're in separate rooms at the beginning while A is getting irradiated. And then they're in separate rooms for the 2 hours after before each get killed. So, and the difference between the two conditions is whether A gets irradiated before they swim together or after. So what this paper showed was that it didn't matter when the fish swam together, before or after. Both group B fish showed evidence of protective effects to irradiation. That means here. Okay? That means here. It means that, and the reason I got so excited about this paper is I just thought, like, this is therapy. This is it. We swim together. We're swimming together for an hour. And then we're going out into the world. This is so exciting because it shows evidence that this is a quantum process, that basically that you've set up a connection between the two of them. And that's it. Like it doesn't matter about time. And so does that make sense? That
Yeah, absolutely. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you printing out this diagram. So let me ask this question. I mean, I would love for it to really be quantum effect. But of course, as the scientist in me as well, is, well,
Yeah.
what else can it possibly explain this? Could it be um, hormones? Could it be some kind of communication system that we don't really know about yet? I mean, maybe it is quantum effect, but what else could it be potentially? Is there something else that it could be?
How could it be? Because they swam together before the condition that occurred in completely separate rooms after they swam together.
So, and I don't know why my mind just went there, but
Yeah.
I'm sure, or maybe you haven't, but have you ever read anything about near-death experiences from patients?
I read a lot
So,
about near-death experiences as part of this journey.
of course you have. Why wouldn't
Yeah,
you?
of course. I know.
So the part that I'm thinking about is how when a person, and there have been many accounts about this, when a person is near one's death, let's say on an operating table, or they're actively resuscitating this patient, there's this common phenomena where the person all of a sudden detaches from one's body
Mhm.
and can find themselves in a corner of the room watching what's happening, listening, and being able to actually tell if they come back into the body and their resuscitation works, they can tell exactly what happened during the resuscitation process, sometimes to a great detail, even though they were not conscious. And then there were also stories where they could actually tell what's happening in the room nearby,
Yes.
even though once again they're not there. They're unconscious. They're being
Yes.
worked on. How do they know what their parents are experiencing and dropping ketchup on their shirts or something like that in the next room? Um, so I mean, we could maybe see it as a quantum effect, but what if there is some other four-dimensional kind of way that we exist where we
Yeah.
haven't really realized yet, and this fourth dimension
Yeah.
comes in somehow. It's not really quantum effect, it's just another dimension that perhaps we are tapping into. I'm just pulling this out, I don't know, out of my, like, left ear, but there are other possibilities, possibly, even though you're so miles away, maybe there's something else that connects us aside from quantum.
Yeah, well, that's what I think too. I mean, that was really my next step is um I it I think there is, I mean, I think we're all part of one big interconnected fabric. That's what I think. And I think quantum mechanics has done the best job at talking about how that might all work. But where the next step that I went through is, I mean, I was really trying to play catch up with all this quantum mechanics stuff, and it's a lot to try. I mean, in the middle of a life with kids and a job. So I went on YouTube because that's what you do, right? When you want to learn
These days,
something.
yes.
That's right. And I watched this video interview, a conversation between Roger Penrose and a man, Bernardo Kastrup. So you clearly know who Penrose is, but I'll say for the listeners, Penrose is he's actually a knight, Sir Roger Penrose. He's an astrophysicist who, with Hameroff, yeah, Hameroff came up with the Orcar theory that microtubules are where quantum effects happen in the brain. So, he's an interesting guy, but the person who really got my attention was Bernardo Kastrup, and he started off as a computer scientist. Then he worked at CERN, which is the largest particle collider in the world, so a quantum physics like mecca. And then after CERN, he worked in industry, and when he was working in industry, he began to get very interested in philosophy and was pulled away by what he calls the daemon, like the life force in him, to go learn philosophy and then write many, many philosophy books. And he has been the leader of the renaissance of analytic idealism, which is the idea that mind, consciousness is really the fundamental unit of everything, that that's the solution to the hard problem of consciousness. Consciousness is it.
Mhm.
Consciousness is everything. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of meeting someone and just feeling that like you've been struck by lightning. Like, yes.
My
Uh,
husband.
yeah, yeah, that's so beautiful. I mean, I've had it too, maybe 4 or 5 times in my life, face to face with people, but I had this with him because he was such an such a curious person, such an interested person, such a clear thinker, such a precise thinker. And he just explained things in a way that made sense to me. And I read his books. So first his book on Jung, which it's beautiful. He's very interested in Jung. And then another one, Rationalist Spirituality, I mean, that book changed my life. It's a fantastic book. Not only integrating quantum physics, philosophy, spirituality, commenting on things like near-death experiences and terminal lucidity, really bringing together a lot of the things, integrating the science that I was reading, but also the many experiences that I was having.
Mhm.
And it really opened me up and made me think like, okay, that's what it gave me a framework, um, to think in that way. And you
What
could
kind of
call
framework?
this idea that like we're not well, it made me let go of a materialist way of seeing things. I really just let go of the idea that that we're all just bunches of matter, and started to see that when we're doing therapy and when we're being together, like we're working with mind. We're not just working with brain. We have to know how to work with the brain, but we're working with minds, and that these minds are about a like part of a big fabric that we're all connected in. And that to me explained the synchronicities. It explained how I was able to feel these things in my body that didn't make sense in any classical framework. Uh, and yeah.
So what did you read by him that really struck you as like, aha? And how can we understand what you're understanding now? How does it all make sense to you? And um, perhaps
Um,
maybe we can try to tap into it too.
yeah. Well, it really was the Rationalist Spirituality book that did it, but so much of my learning has been experiential learning. Like it's been, maybe what I would suggest is just to be open in your own life to seeing some of these things. Because, as you were saying, probably everyone experiences synchronicities, but if you're not open to seeing them or if you're closed off to them, then you won't see it. And part of Kastrup's theory that I think this answers your question, that really resonated with me was that this greater mind is it's trying to learn about itself and it's trying to grow. And these experiences that we're having here at each of us as a little outcropping of consciousness are all purposeful and meaningful. And that gave me a lot of trust just in a whole variety of experiences that I was having. And that I was having with my patients. Like just having a general attitude of this is all unfolding in a way that's important. that's here for my learning, and shifted a lot of things from why is this happening in a like, oh, why is this happening to a, oh, why is this happening?
So if I may rewind things a little bit, you've mentioned consciousness and kind of universal consciousness, how it's actually like one of the basic things that are out there, like that's everything is made of it. Can we agree upon what consciousness is when you're talking about it? Kind of, can you
Huh.
define what you mean by it? Because I'm sure that listeners define consciousness in various ways. You're probably talking more like philosophically, maybe neuroscientifically, but we use that word for so many different things in our life. What is
Right.
that? Uh, what do you define it as?
Um, so I haven't ever answered this question before, so I would think of it as like that kind of what quantum physics will call qualia, like the experience of being.
Hmm.
So when I look at your sweater and I'm having this experience of red, like that's my consciousness having an experience of red.
Hmm.
It does require actually being awake, I guess. I mean, it depends whether you think about it like the consciousness that's awake or the consciousness that in an NDE is up in the corner of the room watching everything happen. Um, you know, I suppose I think we could talk about it either way. I think when people talk about the hard problem of consciousness, they're talking about more like what's my experience of your sweater being red? Um, but but I certainly think of it as more of like I'm not really into labels because I think reality is reality no matter what words you put on it. But like a what one some people might call God, some people might call a one consciousness, some people might call source, whatever that is. So I suppose it has different meanings for me depending on how you talk about it. Um, but it always comes back to me to connectedness.
Hmm. Yeah, when I was reading various books about consciousness and the hard problem of consciousness, of how it
Yeah.
arises to
Yeah.
begin with, does it arise? Is it always there? What like is there a difference between the physical and the mental and
Right.
the thoughts and how, like just so many different theories. But one of the things that speaks to me a lot is this idea that, as you said, consciousness is prevalent throughout the universe, throughout the world, and that it is not something that arises, but perhaps it is always there. It just has different manifestations of it.
Exactly.
And the way that I read this visual example is where if consciousness is an ocean, then
Yes.
humans and everything else are almost like waves that come off, and we are not individual of this consciousness, but we are just these momentary manifestations and forms of consciousness, and then we at some point go back to this ocean of
Yes.
consciousness, and we're all just different parts. and
Yes.
and I heard Huckabees, going back
Yeah.
to that movie that I
Yeah.
love so much. Dustin Hoffman is trying to visualize it as he takes this sheet and he covers like his hands with the sheet, and he's like, um and this is you, and this is me, and this is an orgasm, and this is something else. And so he just like tries to basically explain how this sheet is everything, but we're just come up as blips of time
That's
and existence into these forms.
that's
Um,
beautiful.
which was funny and at the same time,
Profound.
so profound.
Yeah.
Um, and so is this kind of what we're talking about? That this sheet, this ocean, this consciousness is how we're all connected somehow? And then if that is the case, then, and we're talking about quantum physics too, then somehow perhaps consciousness can also be explained through quantum mechanics?
Right.
Or is it connected?
Yeah. I mean, eh, so, the Castro book that I really loved that changed things for me, Rationalist Spirituality, it talks about consciousness as like a big sheet of aluminum foil.
Hmm.
And each one of us being like an outcropping, like you punched just like the sheet actually, that you punched it up. And because it's aluminum foil, it can reflect and it so it kind of gave a concept of ego, like it can reflect in on each other. But fundamentally, it's still a part of this big aluminum foil sheet. And if you have a similar shape to this one over here, resonance can happen between you and this sheet, this other part of the sheet. And so to me, that's actually the part of the book that made me go, oh, yeah, that's exactly how it feels. That's just the experience that I've been having.
So then question then is, we're talking about humans right now. Does this resonance happen with animals? And then let's just take it a step forward. Does it happen with bicycles and rocks too?
I don't think so with bicycles and rocks. I know there's a whole takedown of panpsychism that I don't really know the ins and outs of, but although that said, like I have a rock right here, so maybe I buy it. I don't know.
But hey, I mean, there's crystals. We all talk about
I
crystals,
know.
and that's
I
somehow
know.
supposed to resonate with us.
I know. I know. Um I mean, I have a dog and I think you have a dog and I think the dog is in on the aluminum foil for sure.
Yes, my dog wears a tin hat.
That's right. That's right. Oh,
No, I totally agree. So where do we go from there then? Like if we have this realization that we're definitely all connected, um, does it matter if we've met that person before? And I mean, do we need to cross paths with someone in order for us to resonate with them?
hmm. I mean, I don't know. I would guess maybe not. Like maybe you have to wonder what crossing paths really means, you know?
Ooh, that's a
You
good
know?
question.
You know. I
And
mean,
when?
and when, right? Um I really like thinking about the quantum physics ideas in this space because the implications of it are really interesting.
In
Um
this space, you mean the therapeutic space?
yeah, in the therapeutic space, but also in this like, okay, if we're all one, if we're all an outcropping on the aluminum foil in that same big sheet of aluminum foil, what does that mean about? For me, it definitely makes me think about. So this is my theory of everything, which is not my theory of everything. Like, and Castrom's not the only one who's talked about it. Like, a lot of Eastern religions have talked about this. Rumi, who's my favorite poet, a lot of his stuff has talked about that. I mean, this is a little bit everywhere. But it's interesting to then think about how can we use some of these concepts and bring them into our job as healers, um, to do more than just, learn a technique or know what to say, but how to bring some of these, I think, stronger effects into what we're trying to do. So to me, that was the next phase, and what I got really excited.
Interesting. So how do you think it's affecting you in your therapy? How do you bring it into your work? How do you bring it into your life? Like, has it changed anything for you going forward?
Wow, yeah. Um, so So non-local effects are about formal causality. So I said this, they're about the conditions that you set. So like if you're the fish paper, like that's what they set out to do this, right? They set out to do these things and do these exposures and make these measures. And that was essential to this all happening. So to me, that really impacts what I think about how we think about what we're doing in therapy. So it really matters what the experiment is that we're setting. So like the conditions that we set matters. So um, we want to think about like who's involved in the conditions. So when we sit in the room, have we consciously included kind of the healthy part of the patient? Are we able to envision a future version of the patient who's there and who wants to help us? Almost like wanting to detect a future healed version of the patient, like having an intention to do so. So for me, it's really impacted like I need to be able to hold a positive future for this patient in my mind. Like if I don't think I can help someone, that's a problem. So that's a thing I'll do. And actually, if I feel stuck with someone, that's something I will try to use these quantum conditions. I'll think like, okay, here's the thing we need to detect. Like, here's the conditions we're going to set. And I'm going to imagine a future where I observe this person having sorted this out. And this is what they'll look like. Um, so it also is really, I think part of this is you actually have to be a good detector. You have to know how to detect. So um, that means that you need to get really good at observing what's going on. So if what you're intending to observe is the patient caring for themselves, then it would be really important to notice any little glimmer of that showing up in the session to be able to observe it. Um, it also is very important that you get the patient in on the process. So help the patient learn how to be a detector, and help them learn how to be a detector of the thing that they want, and work through anything that impairs the patient from being a part of the experiment, right? So if we imagine in one of the types of therapy that I do that there's this basic idea, maybe it's not necessarily inherent to this, but that everybody who shows up has the part of them that wants to heal and the part of them that wants to stay the same. And so we want to have in our mind that the part of them that wants to heal is there in the process, and to be able to have the skills, and this is not quantum, this is therapy skills, to get the part of them that wants to heal to be part of the experiment. And that means you need to know how to work with resistance and defenses and anxiety, fear, and shame, the things that hold people back from participating in a positive process. Um, so uh, then there's also like I don't know what the word is. It's some people might call it faith. Some people might call it trust, belief, but just um, believing that the healing forces are there from the get-go, like in my mind, including them. And I actually believe that by doing that, it helps them be there. I mean, certainly it probably helps me look for them better, but without me having done anything. Huh.
Well, I mean, that's what we call trusting the process as well in the
Totally. Yeah.
psychodynamic psychotherapy. And we say it
Absolutely.
all the time, like, you just have to trust the process.
Right. Right. Yeah, it is. It is trusting the process, but it's actually trusting the process in a way that allows for non-local effects to occur. Like quantum conditions, they're rare, but you kind of have to you have to set the experiment and then press go. Um so yeah, so I think those are the main things. And then the other piece of it is that just like again looking at the fish paper, you know, you were psychodynamically trained, I was psychodynamically trained. Like everybody was told go get your own therapy, do your own work,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, we're all told that. And you can see that through the lens that we've talked about at first, just countertransference. Like don't bring your own stuff into the other person's healing process. Um, but I also think about it like through the lens of that fish paper and through the lens of some of this quantum stuff, which is that if I go and I do my own work on something and I heal something in me, that because I am already entangled with my patients, I've done a good thing for them already. Like before I even walk in the room. And I've had things like this happen. Like I canceled on a very self-hating patient last minute in order to be with someone who was in town on spur of the moment. It was really out of character for me to do, but I just really wanted to see this person. And so I
Mhm.
did it, and it was wonderful. And then I showed up to my next session with that person, and they had had a breakthrough that they were actually worthy and not so bad. And it just made me wonder, like, we both just took a little step, but we weren't in the room together. You know, maybe that's really a thing. So it makes this way of thinking about it, to me, gives our work like almost another our personal work as therapists, like the way we care for ourselves, what we heal inside ourselves, like a whole nother dimension, a capacity that can help our patients, like, yeah, before we've even done anything.
So interesting. When you were talking about how in the beginning you kind of imagine a healed or a patient that
Yeah.
is in a better place than they're
Yeah.
at now, it made me actually think of quantum physics related. There was some experiment done a few years ago, and I don't really know exactly all the details, and maybe you know about this, where they try to recreate some time travel, or not recreate, create time travel, where two entangled particles basically, one was somehow affecting the other in a
Yeah.
different time,
Yes.
and that and again, I need to read this again,
Right.
but I've definitely come across this. So the way I'm explaining it definitely sounds uneducated. But the idea that somehow these two entangled particles can affect each other in different time frames may be important based on, I mean, maybe somehow important for us
Yeah.
ourselves and going forward to. How, not sure, but the idea of intention may have some sort of greater quality to it than just this mind exercise. Perhaps there's something more to it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I know about as much about that experiment as you do. Um, and, this is where it's just a challenging thing because, um, I can't possibly know everything about quantum physics, philosophy, all of spirituality, there's so much to know. But there is evidence in quantum mechanics that the future can affect the present, which is one of those ideas that's really hard to wrap your mind around. But I do think that when we envision a future self for the patient, in a way, it's like it's like collapsing a possible outcome. It's actually like, in a way, inviting the future self to come back and impact on the present.
Can you kind of explain? I mean, I understand when you're saying when you're saying
Yeah,
collapsing, but I
yeah,
think a lot of people may not understand the collapsing aspect of quantum mechanics that is very important
right. Yeah,
in what we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think the classic experiment in, quantum mechanics is Schrodinger's cat, where you have this box, and inside the box, uh, there's some, like, radium that's gonna decay and a Geiger counter and a cat, right? Help me out
Yeah.
here, I think this is
Yes.
about
No.
right,
Yeah.
right?
I'll help you if need be. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, and you can't from the outside, the observer can't see inside the box. The the radium is decaying, and so at some point, the cat's gonna die. So we're just pretending this isn't a cat that would meow and make a ton of noise. But to me, that's a real flaw in the experiment. But anyway, so when you're standing outside of that, you don't know if the cat is alive or dead. And in a way, before you've observed it, the cat is both alive and dead. And it's only when you open the box and look that you know. And so that's called superposition. It's
Hmm.
both alive and dead. And so in a way, that's how people arrive to us, right? They arrive like both wanting to change and not. Um, and we don't know what their future is going to look like. Which one is it going to be? And so um, the brain changes by like measuring what's going on in the brain. We can use our attention to change it, and that's a quantum idea. Measuring a system changes a system.
Unless, of course, there's multiverse theory here,
I
and there
know.
is
I
no
don't buy
collapse at
that.
all, and then we're just living different universes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's for a different episode.
I know, I know. So in my mind, when I'm really observing and believing in a future self, I'm like collapsing it into that in the future in a way. Um, and and then inviting that healthier future self to come back and impact on the present, which is what that experiment that you're referring to would suggest. And that feels so weird. Like that's not how we think about things happening. But I think that's why I like a lot of this quantum mechanics stuff is because it gets a handle on some of the weird stuff that happens to me and probably happens to you and happens to most people more often than they realize it and certainly more often than they talk.
But I think it's very, very important to challenge our intuitions because
Mm.
very often what we think doesn't make sense actually could make sense. I mean, centuries ago, there were many things that seemed absurd and that science kind of proved that this is the case. Or when people talked about germs and the need to wash hands between surgeries seemed to be kind of stupid. I mean, what germs? What little unseen things that we need to wash our hands for?
Yeah,
And then, I mean, obviously now it's just second nature to us because we already
right,
have all that knowledge. And so
right.
I think there's many things that seem absurd or really out there to us that we may discount at first because it doesn't make sense to us. But with time and flexibility of practicing thinking outside of the box, it actually can bring us to more reality-based presence than we
Yeah.
actually are living in.
I totally agree. And I mean, if you go into the whole paradigm shift, history of science, Thomas Kuhn, sphere, that every time there's been a paradigm shift, the people who are leading that, everybody thinks they're nuts. Um,
Absolutely. Scientists included.
yeah, yeah. And if we went back 2,000 years and told the people living back then about how we think everything is matter and that science rules everything, they would think we were nuts. I mean, that in the course of human history, the way that I'm describing things working is actually more prevalent than the way we Westerners tend to think of causality.
Mhm.
So which is why I
Absolutely.
say, like, it's not really my theory of everything, it's not a new theory. The only part that I think might be new is trying to integrate that into the therapeutic space and to how we do things, to try to invite some of that
Yeah.
into our impact.
So I guess my question is to you. You experience somatic countertransference. You're able to feel what the other person may be feeling, or what you
Yeah.
call somatic resonance.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't think it's a common phenomena. I mean, I think a lot of us have a bit of like psychic knowing when something is
Mhm.
happening, but the somatic psychic
Right.
knowing, or whatever you want to call it, resonance, um, is not as common. I mean, I personally don't think I have experienced that much. I have other ways of experiencing, like I have sudden downloads or I get images, like you mentioned. Like I get that type of knowledge, but not the physicality of it. And so, what is it about you that you think has given you the ability to do that?
I mean, I think one is that I grew up in a family where people weren't that aware of their emotions, and so I think I, as a like from very young, got very trained on watching people and picking up on subtle cues. Um, that's probably true of a lot of people in our field. Um,
Touche.
yeah, but I suspect I have some kind of a natural capacity, but I have also put a lot of time into this. You know, I have a friend colleague who is one of the leaders of a model that uses a lot of affective neuroscience to do therapy and studies a lot of these body processes in the context of affective neuroscience. And one of the things he said to me is that you've essentially made conscious what's unconscious for most people. So, so really, just I can't understate how much time I spent between my own therapy work, doing therapy with people, reviewing therapy tape, and also with my friend Robin, who has not only my capacities, but additional ones, um, watching tape together and cross referencing while we paid attention to ourselves. So that there was actually there was effort on my part, like quite a lot to develop it once it came up. Um, but I think also some of it is just me, but I think most people, if they did what I did, would get a lot of it. And it, for what it's worth, it's not always helpful. Like sitting with someone and when they dissociate and their mind completely fragments and they can't think straight, that's not helpful as a therapist if your mind fragments with them. It's not helpful, but it is what happens.
Are you able to set up boundaries? Like, are you able to control when you allow it to come in and not?
I probably could, but I haven't felt I needed to try. I take it in as information, but like this rock, when people do that, when they have such a fear response that their prefrontal cortex goes offline and there's no thinking happening, and then all of a sudden there's no thinking for me happening either, and we have two no thinking people in the room. That's why I have this rock. So I'll pick it up, I'll move it between my hands, and then I'll move into helping them bring their fear response down so that we can both regulate. So I've sort of practiced on it. Um, and I can sort of be aware of it without being in it, if that makes sense. I can be an observer of the experience in my body without it overtaking me.
Yeah.
Um, and I would say that at this point, the main place that it slows me down ever is that, like, not being able to think. Um, but my patients are pretty used to me saying, okay, well, we're going to need to, it seems like there's a lot of fear around or a lot of anxiety because neither of us can think right now. And so let's see what we need to do so that we can both think clearly.
So, what are your thoughts about people who practice energy healing? I mean, there's a lot of what you're saying in the work that they do.
Mhm.
I don't know what's going on with me. They can sense a lot of the somatic things that are coming up in the person that they're working on. They can feel if something is off, and then they
Mhm.
work on different chakras and different energetic centers in the body. What do you make of that? Do you think there's some parallels? What do you think about energetic healing? Any thoughts?
Um, I don't really think there's more than one kind of healing. I just kind of think healing is healing. And that there are definitely people who are really gifted at, reading the field or, there would be other names for what I'm describing. And I've definitely been to massage therapists who do that they can feel it. They can be like, here, it's in your shoulder, and they're guided. I usually ask if I'm getting massaged, do you go by what you can feel in my muscles, or is it something you notice in your own body? Um,
Of
so
course, you would ask that.
yeah, of course I would ask that. I've had some very interesting conversations with massage therapists.
Ditto, actually. And that's actually a question I've also asked before because I have had a masseuse.
Yeah.
She was she was phenomenal and she was very intuitive and
Yeah.
she would just go for the spots that really hurt and she would do like the work on those spots and I would just be amazed at how did she know this? And
Yes.
I asked her the same exact question. Do you intuit? Do you feel it? And she's just kind of said like I just know. It just
Yeah.
like I can feel it somehow.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think what I've seen is I've seen that some people who do the energy work aren't as trained in kind of what to do afterwards when it comes out. So I had someone go to a really gifted Reiki person and just kind of unleashed a whole bunch of trauma inside of them. But then it was everywhere, and the person was really dysregulated. And the person didn't have the skills to kind of help them pack up and go out into the world.
Hmm.
But I definitely think that there are gifted people across disciplines. How could
Yeah.
there not be? How could it just be us?
Absolutely. It's not just us. No, this is really fascinating. I am wondering if you can give us a few more examples in your practice of where you have come across synchronicities or somatic countertransference, something that you think maybe many of us experience, and then maybe something that is really out there that we could scratch our heads about.
Okay. Okay. Um, so a simple one was when I was on a Zoom call with a patient for a therapy session. And we were having what I thought was just a pretty normal back and forth. And I kept having this incredible clenching feeling in my chest, like terrible clenching. And I thought I was asking her about anxiety. I was getting nothing about anxiety. And then I finally just said, like, I don't know what it is, but I have this terrible clenching in my chest. And she said, well, I'm having an asthma flare and I haven't called my doctor.
Oh my goodness.
and, and I'm just like, you have to call your doctor. Like, I can't breathe. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but that's what happened. So I basically picked up on her asthma flare, and I actually had to go home and use my own inhaler. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and then I felt better, but it wasn't.
The question, I guess, would be if she used her inhaler, would you feel better?
No, she
Inhaler.
never got treated, so I needed to go use my inhaler. Like,
God.
I
And
know.
maybe if you got treated, did that make her feel better?
That is a really fascinating question, actually. Well, she did ultimately feel better, so who knows? So that's one. And then the synchronicities are fun. So that's actually a mild somatic. So then I had other things happen, and this was back when before I was sort of in on the idea that something really huge was going on that I was participating in. But this was with a patient. We were doing defense work. And we were talking about some part of her that didn't want her to receive care or didn't want good things for her or something like that. And I asked her, how do you experience that in your body? Where do you feel that inside your body, the part of you that doesn't want that for you? And I asked her that, and I felt this really hard upside down U right in the middle of my chest. And so she sat there, and then she said, right here. And I said, does it have a shape? And she said, it's a video game control.
Hmm.
Is the upside down U. And
What made you ask about a shape?
well, because I felt a shape, so I asked her if it had a shape,
I
like,
see.
yeah,
Okay. Mhm.
yeah. And I said, okay, well, why don't you take it out? Why don't you imagine taking it out, but make sure when you do it that it doesn't hurt you at all? And let me know when you have it out. And I actually felt it. I felt it come out. And then all of a sudden I felt this heaviness in my left hand. And I said, "Is it out now?" And she looked at me with huge eyes and said, "Yeah." So, that's a really extreme example. It's mostly the more like the asthma type stuff, but you can see these kinds of things happening. It's beyond just mirror neurons. It's something else. Um, and then the synchronicities. I think I'm quantum entangled with birds. I I love birds. For my college thesis, I went to Panama and I studied birds, and I just like birds. And I'm not going to turn my camera around, but my office, it's like a big rectangle with a big window here. And I'm on the third floor, so I'm always watching the birds. So I was sitting with a patient who was experiencing a really high degree of fear. She wasn't afraid of me, but her eyes were huge. She's had a lot of trauma, and she was really in terror. And I knew what she needed was to be able to observe the terror, to get some distance on it. And so I said, "Hey, you and I are going to be like two birds right now." And I pointed over I have little bird statues on my bookcase over here. And I said, there are see those birds over there? We're going to be like that. And that's what I do out there. And if you look out there, you'll see there are these vultures. They're always out there. And I just watch them, and they're soaring above, and they're watching what's happening. And that's what we're going to do with the fear that you're having right now. We're just going to watch it, and we're going to watch it here. And a vulture came and landed right outside my window. Now, I've been in this office for 3 years. I've had vultures land on that window maybe 5 times total, and she saw it and I saw it. Her fear was gone. It really, I mean, I didn't know what to make of it. I was joking to my friends. I think I beckoned a vulture, but it, but, but it felt, extremely synchronistic.
Hmm.
So
And she took it as such as well.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. Yeah. I said, "You should take a picture." So she took a picture, and yeah, and it was some of the calmest I've ever seen her. It was really amazing.
And so has that fear returned, or is this something that has persisted?
Well, sure. It takes work, takes work.
But
It
in
didn't
that moment, it was gone.
It was gone. Yeah. Yeah, I had another time where 2 vultures came and visited, um, with a patient where actually it was one of those times, when you're with a patient and they bring up something and you're like, "Oh, that's my conflict. I know that conflict."
Sure, happens to all of
Yes.
us.
Happens to all of us. And in this particular session, one vulture came and landed as she's describing her thing, and then I said something like, I really understand this. I really, as a person, understand this." And then another vulture came and landed. And then 2 vultures just sat out there for the rest of the session.
Little buddies.
Yeah. Yeah. And I said to her, I said, I think they're here to take something. So what do, what do they need to take? Um, so it felt very magical. And, they came and they stayed for the rest of her session, and they stayed for about 10 minutes afterwards, and then they left.
I love that. It's interesting because I have had other people use the descriptor magical when it comes to the work that happens in therapy sometimes because something happens
Hmm.
and um, things get better, the person grows. How it's sometimes difficult to trace. Like we know we're doing the work, we know we're processing, but it's not sometimes very concrete to be able to say, well, we did this and hence you're feeling better. It takes years and then sometimes things click and the person looks back and I've had people tell me like it sometimes this process feels magical because
Right.
somehow things happen and how we don't know. We just know it happens. But it happens so frequently in therapy.
Yes.
And I think that therapy is in some ways like a very small incubator of a lot of these feelings being much more amplified than they are
Hmm.
maybe in the day-to-day life. But it is an example of the power that is out there somehow
Yes.
that just not as aware of that
Yes.
in therapy it's really in your face much more
Yes.
so than maybe in day-to-day life.
Yes. Yeah, and you have the opportunity to focus in on it and really concentrate on it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree. There's a really fun paper. It's about fractal dynamics in clinical practice. And
Ooh.
yeah, I'll send it to you. But the idea, it's a psychologist, but the idea, fractals are patterns that are self similar. So the small reflects the whole, the inner reflects the outer. And she goes through this thing talking about like that chaos is like right at the edge of fractal dynamics, and maybe that's where we see synchronicities. But to me, that's really important that it's important that we take people to the edge of chaos. Like that's what we're trying to do is we want to disrupt what's going on, and we want to have the chance for different things to happen. And to me, and I think that's what you're speaking to with how therapy is, that it's more focused and we want to be more focused, to try to disrupt these things and have the chance for something magical to happen. I am part of my being a good scientist thing was to meet with Harold Wallach, who with Ottmansbacher and Romer came up with this idea of generalized entanglement. Yeah. And to talk through some of these things with him, he was so generous with me. We had a lovely conversation, and one of the things that he said to me is, really good therapists are spiritual healers. And so, I mean, this is kind of back to me feeling like it doesn't really matter what words we use. Non-locality, magic, like it's kind of all the same process.
I think you're right. Maybe for you and me, but I think for people out there who think of magic as silly children's play versus science, that's the adults' explanation of reality. I think
Yeah.
that language sometimes matters. And while to me
Mm.
personally, a lot of the magical stuff is science not yet explained.
Yeah,
Um, to
totally.
others, it may just be silly, stupid stuff that why are we even talking about it? And you're being a non-serious physician
I
by even
understand.
dabbling in these things.
I see.
So it took me quite some time to actually be brave enough to step into this space and have these conversations. Um, but this is what I truly love. I love these mysteries and
Yeah.
this true experience that I cannot unexperience.
Yes.
Um, but these things really are happening,
Mhm.
and how do we explain them?
Yes.
Um, and unless you're experiencing it, it's difficult to imagine experiencing it. Like like you said earlier, a lot of this is experiential,
Yes.
and I agree with you. A lot of it is experiential, and unless someone steps into it and allows for the experience to take over, magic will continue to be a silly play as opposed to then questioning what just happened.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree. But I also think that the way that we make it has to be the science. It's so dogmatic. Like in a way, it's as dogmatic as some religions are. To say, and and I think this is something that we share. Like I just have a lot of openness. I've never bought into that kind of a thing. I just like to see things for what they are. And, as you said, these experiences teach you so much. And that's where I got into the NDE things. I mean, people who have a near death experience, people who do a psychedelic journey, they say, this is the realest thing that's ever happened to me. And it changes the way that they experience things.
Absolutely. When I got into even meditating, and I am a pretty regular meditator, I got into it probably over like 14 years ago or so. And the first time I started doing it much more regularly was when I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat. It was a Vipassana meditation retreat. And so
Yeah.
it was completely silent and it was very structured and it was very difficult. But I have experienced some things during that retreat that to this day I just cannot explain. And it was an experience um, of being in this world that I haven't experienced before, like
Yeah.
this level of existence. And it sounds so abstract. I can't even explain it very well. But there were times when I felt like I was almost like separated from my body
Yes.
experience. I had some weird experiences where I had visitations from people who were deceased telling me to pass on messages to other people, which again, I am not a medium. I never was. I still am not. But somehow some things kind of opened up and these things came to me. And I don't know what to make of it, but it just expanded somehow. And so to this day, my meditation allows for me to experience things much more sensitively.
Yes.
That's not a word. Sensitivity, in a
Yes.
more sensitive way,
Yes.
um, that I didn't even know existed before.
Yeah.
Um, you said that you spent hours, I mean, training. You watch yourself
Yeah.
during sessions, and that you're doing a lot of research. Is there anything that you do to hone in on experiencing
Yeah.
different things in the world?
I'm like one of those people who's never been a good meditator. Like I feel like I want to, but I
There's no
don't
such
get.
thing.
I know. Is there such thing as a good meditator? Maybe not. I mean, to me, it's been more like I mean, I have all these poetry books, and I just wait for one of them to tell me to pick it up, and I pick it up, and I read it, and I feel it. I feel it. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's been very internal for me, but it hasn't necessarily been meditation. But it does remind me that of something that I didn't say. That's very much a part of the way that I see things, the everything, and the therapy theory is that our openness to experience is vital.
Hmm.
That, like, by you being a person who is open to those experiences in your meditation retreat, and by me being a person who is open to whatever arriving in my body or arriving in my life or any birds, that we're actually creating conditions for something incredible to happen. Um,
But then
that
maybe some people would say, well, you're not really opening up. You're now creating a space of where you're more likely to see patterns that maybe they're not there. And this is in your mind. And you're just creating the synchronicities and you're looking for them. And so you're not really observing what is, you're creating what is. What would you say to people like that?
I don't know, I kinda wanna give him a hug. Like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry your life feels like that. That sounds really hard."
You're so sweet.
You know, people will disagree with us, and that's okay, but it's a confining way to live to think that way. Um, it's limiting, so
Agreed. It doesn't feel confining. It doesn't feel like I'm creating the things I want to observe. In fact, it really opens the world up to see things from different perspectives that maybe I wasn't looking at before.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I think our openness to impact is a huge variable here. Like, are we gonna be impacted by the world? Are we gonna be impacted by our patients? Are we gonna be impacted by people who've died? Are we going to be impacted by our future selves? And that, to me, there's some I'm using the word magic in having that state inside of ourselves and bringing it into the room with our patients because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for impact. They want that.
And as my supervisor has always said, it's not necessarily the the work that we're doing. It's the relationship that matters the most. It's
Right.
the relationship, it's how you bring it yourself into the session. And the person may not know everything about you as a therapist, but what you embody, what you bring in, what your beliefs are in some ways shape who you are as a healer. And that shapes how the healing process occurs.
Totally.
Um, it's
Totally.
it's the relationship that really truly heals.
I had a fun conversation with a therapist friend once about like what do we think each other's magic is when we do therapy? Because she's somebody who I used to be in a consultation group with who's seen a lot of my tapes. And she was like, your patients just really know you care about them. They know
That's a
it.
huge gift.
Isn't it? Yeah, and
It is.
that was another thing about the NDE literature is that it's just like it's love. It's all love on the other side. It's non-judgment, it's love. It's all connection. And so it really has freed me up to just let that part of myself be present in the background all the time.
Hmm.
and to believe that that does something.
I actually think it also does something for us. I mean, I am incredibly fortunate to do the work that I do, and I would like to believe that I'm helpful to my patients, but I would also say that my patients are so incredibly
Right.
important to me,
Yes.
and how much growth I have had. There
Yes.
is so much meaning behind connecting with people who maybe otherwise would not have been your friends, or you may never even cross paths.
Yes.
And getting to know people from different walks of life with different political, ethnic, racial, religious backgrounds,
Yeah.
um, and sitting in the space where you really allow for a relationship to occur is so healing, not just hopefully to them, which I'm really hoping it is happening, but also to me. It
Yes.
really elevates me as a human.
Yes. I absolutely have had that experience. I have a patient right now who is just it's just one of the bravest people I have worked with in a long time. Like, she always goes there. And as I was preparing to meet with you today, I thought about her so much because I just thought, like, well, this is a brave thing I'm doing. Like, because everything, like, working with her, I have to be as brave as she is. And it's been so beautiful for me. Yeah. So it's fun to be brave with you too.
Ditto.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're being brave here.
Yeah.
Um, Although it seems like such a natural thing for you. You have a lot to say and to teach us. So you're saying that you're being brave by being here, but it almost seems like, well, a no-brainer that you're here. Of course you're going to be here. This
Well, I
is
don't know. I kind of think that you arrived in my life at just the right time, because it's been mostly I have a lot. My husband has listened to me for hours and hours, like such a good soul, and I have friends who've listened to me. But to meet somebody who has like similar interests who actually wants to talk about that fish paper with me, like it's just so exciting. And so
you actually, I know that you sent me the paper. I'm going to try to include it actually in the
great.
description for the podcast because I want, if
Hmm.
others are interested in reading it, they should
Hmm.
read this because it is incredibly interesting
Yeah.
to read. We are coming up to the end of our episode, which has been so incredibly interesting and awesome.
So fun.
Are you ready for a lightning round of questions?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Question number one. Um, I have five questions here. I'm actually looking through which one I would like to start. So we're recording on Halloween, just so the listeners know. So I'm going to start with this question. Freud or Frankenstein? Who would be harder to psychoanalyze?
Freud, for sure. Freud.
How come?
Uh, much more defended.
Wait. Are we talking about when I asked about Frankenstein? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Is it the scientist or the monster? Who are we talking about? Who were you thinking
I
about?
was thinking of the monster.
Okay, the monster. Got
Yeah,
it. And you think Freud is more defended than the monster? Wow.
sure. I think the monster would just be like primary process. Like,
That makes sense. Hunger, sex, drives, just drives.
yeah,
Nothing else to really
that's right.
explore.
That's right.
All right. Question number two. Which horror villain could really use a good therapist?
So I am such a sensitive soul that I watch no horror and expose myself to no horror. So this is not a very good question for me because probably all of them. All of them.
Oh my God. You know what? It's really funny. I don't even know why I asked that because I'm like you. I don't know. Like, I would ask you this question, but I wouldn't even know if you were to answer me a horror villain. I probably wouldn't know them. So we're on the same page here.
I have been known to go into the bathroom in the middle of a movie to read the entire plot. And so I can go back in and enjoy the rest of it. Like I can't even. So
I mean, I do that on the couch often. I don't even go to the bathroom. I just Google on my phone.
that's
So
right.
I'm not sitting there in anxiety.
That's right.
Okay, that's fair. All right, moving on to the third question. The
Yeah.
second one was not answered, but that's quite all right. What's heavier, quantum uncertainty or existential dread?
Oh, existential dread.
How come?
It feels so bad inside. It feels heavy and stuff. Quantum uncertainty is, yeah. Whew. Oof. Yeah. Sorry, I just had it. I just had the somatic feeling of existential dread, which is actually awful. So it's like a combination of physical heaviness and terror on the edges. Oof, definitely that
Gosh.
one.
Wow. Okay. Somatic countertransference in real time, except I'm not really experiencing existential dread. So that's just, what would you call that, I guess? What did you experience?
So this happened, just thinking of it, thinking of somebody experiencing it is enough. So
That's impressive. Okay. I will ask the fourth question. I usually ask three, but since the second question was unanswered, we'll go to number four. Um, Most interesting book you have read in the past 6 months? You read a lot.
I feel like I read a lot with for someone with 2 children.
Well, yeah, that
Um,
means you read a lot.
but that does mean I read a lot. I really enjoyed reading After by Bruce Grayson. Have you read his book?
I have actually. I really
Yeah,
enjoy it.
yeah, I read that one. I liked that one a lot. Um,
Could you explain to those who haven't read it what it's about?
yeah, so Bruce Grayson is a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, which is where I went to medical school. It's so funny to me, like, to have a connection to the main place where they do this kind of work. So he's a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia who studies past lives and terminal lucidity, mostly past lives, and he studied under Ian Stevenson, who studied, past lives in children. So this is his book about near-death experiences,
Hmm.
and it was a lovely book. It wasn't necessarily new information to me, but the part of it that I really liked was when he talked at the end about his purpose for writing the book, which and told me what I didn't know, which is that learning about near-death experiences brings people more peace.
Hmm.
And it just resonated because I think about when I talk about these things, like even today with you, I'm like, what is the point? And the point is hopefully that everybody feels a little bit more peaceful. And I don't know, I liked that. So I liked that book.
Well, also, you mentioned earlier that the point is of the collective mind to grow. And so the point of doing all of this and speaking and exploring is for us to grow in in ourselves and in others. And all of
Together.
this is just a growth experience.
Yeah, I did say that. I do think that.
Dr. Liz Alfson, thank you so much for being here. How can our listeners and viewers find you, find your work? Tell us a little bit about how we can find you.
I have a website. I'm in Austin, Texas. It's lizalfsonmd.com. And then on Instagram, I'm at lizalfsonmd. And that's something I'm just getting started at. So I'm hoping today is a jumping off point for me to be talking about this more. If you'd like to hear about the trainings that I do, because I do some trainings online, on my website, there's a tab for training and an email that you can send to get on my listserv.
What kind of trainings do you do?
I've done one on somatic countertransference. I do one on ISTDP, which is the type of therapy that I'm most trained in. And I suspect I'll probably do something on these kind of things in the future. So,
What does ISTP stand for?
intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy.
And who is it usually good for? What kind of people seek it out?
Um, it was formatted for resistance, really
Mm,
the problem of the superego resistance, but it really is pretty flexible for nearly anybody who shows up in my office. So I use that model a lot, and I also use complex integration of multiple brain systems, which is the neuroscience-based model that I mentioned before. So
wow. So I'm guessing the short term is shorter than the usual type of psychodynamic work that's done for years and years. Is that
that's the
kind
idea.
of
Right.
correct? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The idea is that it's shorter, not like time limited, but maybe 6 months instead of 3 years, or 3 years instead of 10 years, or something like that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. It's truly
yeah.
been a pleasure
It's
speaking with
a
you.
pleasure.
Perhaps we can get you back on to speak about the subject even more because there's so much we can
Yeah,
still talk about.
I would love
I
that.
really appreciate this because not that many people want to talk about it either, and you're open to it all. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the Quantum Couch with someone you think might love this space too. If you would like to reach out, you can email me at thequantumcouch@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for The Quantum Couch. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Dr. Ina Conboy. Take good care, stay curious, and keep exploring. The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship with Dr. Ina Conboy or any guest on this podcast. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.